Drowned spirits' revenge. They reached the lake shore at the edge of twilight, a strip of bruised purple sinking over Lake Michigan's endless slate. Tom killed the engine of his aging SUV and looked out toward the water, which curled and uncurled like a patient animal. An old wood placard leaned in the beach grass, scoured by wind. Blackwater Cove. No lifeguards, swim at your own risk. Beneath, somebody had carved in a pocket knife's shaky hand, "She still calls." Creepy branding, Ryan said, pushing open the passenger door. Do they sell merch? I'd rock a "She Still Calls" hoodie. Amy swatted him with a half-rolled sleeping pad. Let's not jinx the weekend in the first 2 minutes. Kate stepped out last, shaded her eyes, and whistled in that low, impressed way she used when something secretly rattled her. John, practical and quiet, circled to the hatch. Tents, lanterns, bundles of kindling, a small cooler that sweated against the early fall heat. They were 5 friends, grown a little older than they felt, clinging to the comfort of annual rituals, this year's ritual camping farther north, where the lake felt less like a city postcard and more like an open question. A small wind combed the tall grass with a dry hiss. From the water came a rhythmic hush and suck, the waves inhaling and exhaling against the stones. Hush, suck, hush, suck. Okay, Tom said, clapping once, a captain kicking off a voyage. We get camp up before full dark, then grill, then ghost stories that won't mess with anyone's REM cycles. Kate arched an eyebrow. You mean they won't mess with your REM cycle? I am a delicate sleeper, Tom admitted. They fell to it. The cove wasn't a proper campground, more a sliver of beach hemmed by 2 humped shoulders of dune and a thicket of scrub oak. Farther in, a trail disappeared into a strip of woods. The sky turned a deeper bruise. A gull wheeled and cried, once then thought better of it, and vanished toward the brighter south. The friends raised 2 tents side by side on a slight rise above the pebbly shore. John knelt to stake corners with a calm engineer's confidence, not pull cinch, while Ryan provided unhelpful play-by-play in a sportscaster voice. Amy set a ring of stones and built a tidy lay of kindling, the sort of fire that always caught on the second try. Kate lined up the lanterns and tested batteries. She smiled at the warm glow. Click, click, lanterns blooming with a moth-soft hum. Somewhere upshore, driftwood clacked together with a hollow knock. Knock, knock. Feels empty, Amy said. She meant empty of other people. She meant it like a question. It's perfect, Tom said. We wanted quiet. Ryan wandered down to the water. He tossed in a flat stone. It skipped twice, then sank. The second skip made a wet tick that felt too loud in the dark. Okay, Ryan said, turning. No lifeguard, but we've got common sense. We keep the shoreline waist deep and that's it. Black water, not black-hearted. You're the last person who gets to define common sense, Kate said. But she was smiling. They ate late and lazily, the way you do when the road has pressed the weak from your bones. Zinc tang of tomato on Burger's mustard grin across Ryan's knuckle before he licked it away. In the dark, the lake's surface sharpened to glossy metal. A sliver of moon sat on it like a chipped coin. The dune grass leaned and lifted, lean and lift, lean and lift, as if responding to a breath they could not see. Every so often, a deeper swell slapped the stone with a flat, startling smack. Somewhere in the near woods, a single tree frog chirped chip, and then fell silent, as if it had remembered not to speak. You know the story, right? Tom said finally when the plates were stacked and the fire snapped low. About this cove. We've been here 90 minutes, Ryan said. It is physically impossible for me to know the story. Amy leaned closer to the fire. Is this the part where you make up something wild and then pretend you saw it on the History Channel? It's local lore. Tom said, palms open, you can trust me. Back in the late 1950s, maybe 61, there was a girl. Some stories say her name was Liza, some say Elsie. She drowned here, went under during a surprise storm. The undertow grabbed her and, well, she didn't come back. Amy hugged her knees. That's not lore. That's just sad. Lore says she calls to people Tom said quieter. Not with words, with imitation. She borrows the sounds you trust, the voice of the person you came with, the clink of your canteen, the splash you think means someone slipped. From the lake, she calls. The fire answered with a soft purr and then a brittle pop. Ryan made a face. That is extremely 1959 of you. Borrowing sounds is the most analog haunting I've heard. People still drown here. Kate said not quite a whisper. A cold wash of air slid across the cove so that the tents crackled like lungs trying to decide how to breathe. John glanced toward the water. Tides, he asked, and then shook his head. There aren't tides here, Seiche Tom said. The lake sloshes when the wind's right. But he didn't sound convinced. They sat a while longer talking about safer things, the cheap motel coffee at the gas station, John's attempt to build a spice rack that would not obey Euclidean geometry, Amy's new trail camera, and the raccoon it had photographed, making 3 consecutive expressions of philosophical despair. It was comfortable in the way of old friendships, the pauses as homely as the speech. If the dark pressed in it, pressed in politely. Later, with the fire collapsed to a red heart and the wind backing off, Tom stood and stretched. Swim, he announced. Just a quick dunk to christen the trip. The lake is like 13% of our memories as people who live near it. We can't not. Kate hesitated, then shrugged and kicked off her shoes. Waist deep, she said to Ryan, to herself. I'll set out the towels, Amy said, practical as a lighthouse. John nodded and moved to the lanterns. The shore murmured as they stepped, the pebbles hissed and clicked underfoot. When Tom broke the first wave, it made a rounded gulping noise gloop like a giant throat trying a word. The water was colder than he'd expected, a crisp warning on the skin that quickly softened to welcome. He waded to his knees, his thighs his waist. He turned back once, hand up, grin big. Feels fine, he said. Come on, slowpokes, Ryan whooped and crashed forward like a kid. Kate went steady and deliberate, her breath making small white flags in the cooling air. Amy, who loved the water but never trusted it entirely, edged into mid-calf and no farther. John hung back at the tide line, shoulders hunched against a wind that had found its knife again. The lake answered with small, regular laps, lip, lip, lip against their legs. Waist deep, Kate said again, and stopped. She lifted her face, watching stars emerge one by one. You can see Cassiopeia. Which one's that, Ryan asked. The queen in the chair, she said. Of course the lake would honor a queen, Ryan said, and splashed Tom, who splashed him back. The splash was a slap, a sharp clack of warm water that rang the cove. They laughed. For a few minutes, they were nothing but bodies made of warm breath and foolishness, surrounded by an immensity that let them be small. Tom tipped his head and floated knees bent so that he could keep his center of gravity loyal to the shallows. That was when he felt it a touch slow and curious on his ankle. Not the brush of weed, not a fish, a weightless hand cool as shadow. He stood so fast, he sent a sheet of water glittering from his chest. Yo, he said, trying for breezy something just. He didn't finish. From directly beneath his feet came a low, syrupy, bubbling blub, blub, blub. as if the lake had started to boil in a pot with no fire. Amy's head snapped up. "Tom, it's nothing," Tom said, because to say anything else would make it real. He took a step towards shore. The lake answered by taking a step with him. Not water, not wave. A pull decisive and silky. It was the sort of sensation your hands know in a strong river, the thing that says this is stronger than you go with it and you live. But this wasn't a river. This was a cove in a lake without tide. Tom, John said, voice precise as a line level come in. Tom moved. He could move. But each step had the ineffable resistance of moving through a room someone else occupied first. He held out a hand. Ryan reached for it and then yelped. "It grabbed me," he said, disbelieving laughter, a brittle glaze over the words. "I'm not kidding, something grabbed, huh?" Tom heard it then. Not the bubbled, boiling new and wrong. A shape of sound he knew absolutely his mother's voice, not as she was now, but as she had been a decade ago, just awake, calling from the kitchen doorway to the end of the hallway. "Tom, it's late, sweetheart. Come in." It came from the water, lifted like mist. The lake repeated the voice, soft as steam through a kettle. "Tom, it's late. Come in." He turned toward the sound that felt like home, and was not. For a single step, he forgot where the shore was. "Tom." Amy's voice braided with fear. "Don't listen." It's not a sudden gulp beneath him. A thick slurp dragged air into water and water into air. It wasn't dramatic what happened. There was no cinematic yank, no flailing silhouette against the moon, no hands thrown to the stars. Instead, the lake simply adjusted its claim on him. It found the seam between his certainty and his balance, and slipped a cool finger into it. He went under to his chin, sputtered, reached, then went under to his mouth, then nose, then eyes. He saw the line of the shore wobble into a gray-green smear. Amy cried out. He saw her bare feet, white as shells. Tom Ryan lunged an arm on fire with intention, but the lake offered him a harmless wave that made him miss by a fraction, and then a new small wave that put him between two steps he could not take. He choked and hacked and found his footing, shocked by how easily the water made jokes of them. Beneath the surface came a rolling rattle like pebbles tumbling in a drum, only it was not pebbles. It was breath and cold moving through moving cold. Tom's ears filled with pressure. He thought idiot thoughts. I forgot to empty my pockets. I forgot to tell my sister I'd feed her cat Sunday. Then the pressure flared and his chest convulsed. The body does not like arrangements where lungs meet lake. Instinct slammed him toward light. He broke surface. "Okay," he said, coughing. "Okay, I'm okay." His coughs cracked the air. And then the water made a sympathetic sound, a low hoo as if consoling him. Amy came to the edge. Her hands hovered helpless. John waited to mid-thigh, jaw set. "Grab me," John said calmly, on 3. Tom nodded, which was when the lake learned him. It mimicked his nod, a clean, down-and-up tug. He went under as if the ground had forgotten him. The world narrowed to the color of old ice. There was a face in the pail a little darker than the water around it, a little whiter than a drowned moon. He didn't see features, no eyes or teeth or ruin. He saw the idea of a woman, the absence of air, shaped into someone who had once had air. Her hair drifted in a kind of grace. She put her palm to his chest, and it felt like a cold apology. His chest spasmed again, a wrongness that made him try to open himself for breath he could not have. Patterns popped behind his eyes, stars on black, and then the stars slid and became the old kitchen with the yellow linoleum, the one with a radio that had always sounded a little far away. "Tom, it's late. Come in." He did. He went with the voice. Above it looked like sudden clumsiness. One moment, Tom's sleeve was in John's hand. The next, a tiny slip changed the geometry. John's fingers closed on fabric, then water. Amy screamed. Ryan fell to his knees in waist-deep water with the tiny slap of a child and clawed blind beneath the surface until his body reminded him that lungs hate heroism. The cove answered with a sound like a long, low swallow, glug, 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 and then a settling hush. Kate ran backward 3 steps up the pebbles, and the pebbles skittered and sizzled. She hadn't moved because she was afraid of the water. She had moved because she was trying to get her phone to find a signal through the black curtain of trees. She failed skyward with everything she had. Tom, she cried again, as if the act of naming could reverse the act of taking. There was no second surfacing, no hand, no bag of air lifting into the shape of his mouth. The lake had made a new thing and kept it. "This isn't funny," Ryan said, and he meant it like a plea to the universe, a rezoning request for reality. "This isn't," he coughed up a thin line of water and swallowed another word. Amy's voice went very small. "He's right there," she said, pointing beyond the ripples, as if Tom had merely put on a trick of invisibility you could undo by remembering childhood rules. He's right." John stood very still. He had the kind of mind that sorted and stacked and did not bend unless the math bent first. He could not find numbers for this. He opened his mouth and shut it again. Farther out in the cove, something blubbered a cozy little unk-unk, like the sound of a contented pie. "Get out," Kate said, turning on them with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including herself. "Out of the water. Now." They obeyed, not because she was right or wrong, because there was a consensus in their bones that the lake was paying attention, and it is rude to act like prey in front of something that is thinking. On the shore, the night put on an extra layer. The air felt heavier, and their clothes felt like they were already a little damp, even the ones they had left near the fire. Amy wrapped her arms around herself and looked at the black plane that had just moved them from 5 to 4. The wind fussed through the dune grass, scratch, 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 like fingernails on a corduroy coat. A deep roll from the water answered a slow underwater growl that wasn't anger so much as deliberation. "We called," Kate said, which could have meant the police or the park office or their parents or God. She dialed anyway. Her screen glowed lonely as a ship's light. "No bars," she said, not even a whisper. "We go inland," John said, decision returning like blood to a limb. "Now. Feet on the path. We'll get signal higher up." Ryan looked at the water. He had an expression Tom would have teased him for a brave kid's look, the one that said, "If you dare me, I'll do it. And if you don't dare me, I'll dare myself." "We're not leaving him." "We're not," Kate said, and her voice was a wire. "But we will not be 5 if we keep standing here like bait." Amy shook her head. "What if he surfaces?" Her voice cracked on the verb like wood popping in a winter stove. "What if he needs us?" The cove gave a small conversational poop, as if a single bubble had burst on the surface. The sound was gentle and obscene. John gathered the lanterns and handed one to Kate, one to Amy. He kept one. Ryan took up a long piece of driftwood like a spear, because ritual comforts the brain. They moved into the path at the edge of the beach lantern light, stroking trunks into amber and black. The trees accepted their entry with the uninterest of old witnesses. Amy looked back only once. She would remember that later in dreams, the lake a pane of dark metal, and then the metal flexing as if something with considerable lungs had sighed beneath it. From behind them, the water issued 3 small clicks, tick, 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 as if a tongue had found teeth. They climbed, The hill wasn't much 50 feet of dune and scrub, but it felt biblical. The sand shifted under every step. The sand made tired sure sounds as it spilled back down, and the dry leaves overhead cackled softly, ha ha ha, like someone who laughs at wrong times. At the crest, John lifted his phone. 3 ghostly bars yawned open. He pressed 9, then 1, then 1. He didn't think about what he would say. A gull screamed from nowhere, and nowhere was how the call ended. The bars fell asleep. The gull's cry sawed the sky key, and then the cove below sighed as a crowd might sigh at the end of a show. That's not possible, Kate said. Wind shear, Ryan said, automatically abusing the one meteorological term he owned. He swallowed. We go higher. They went. The path took its time. Amy's lantern stuttered and came back like a heart deciding about a rhythm. The trees opened finally to a small lookout, really just a blunt edge of dune where the sand cut away to a view of the lake. The whole cove lay beneath their 2 tents, the size of hands cupped in prayer. If the lake had swallowed Tom politely, it spoke impolitely now. A long swell humped itself against the shore and unrolled like a carpet unfurling for a procession that would not stop. The swell made a bass deep hoot as it lifted, then a stretched shh as it laid itself down. I don't like it, Amy said, which was the understatement she owned for that year. You were the one who wanted to find a place that felt real. Ryan said, not unkindly. Well, don't, Kate said. Not now. John cupped a hand like a visor and stared. He was counting. He was always counting. Waves have regularity. He looked for it and did not find it. He looked for pattern and found intention. I think we go back and keep the fire up, he said finally. Light's a boundary. We make boundaries. Until the sun, Amy said. She meant until the sun returns, Tom. She meant until the sun gives us back the part of the world that makes sense. They turned. For a second, the night felt like it had stepped closer, a dealer checking their faces for tells. Ryan lifted the driftwood spear and pointed it at nothing in particular. From the lake rose a sudden thick, low gurgling like water beginning to boil. Ung-ook, rolling through the cove and up the dune until it touched their shins as a vibration. Amy flinched. Do you hear? Yes, Kate said. We all hear it. The sound swelled ung-ook, then thinned into a faint, faraway scream that seemed to be moving, receding, stretching into distance, the way a train horn slides away on rails. It was not a voice they knew. It was not Tom. It was a woman, and the scream did not end so much as it unspooled into the dark until the dark took it and wore it. They did not run. To their surprise, their bodies kept their ordinary speed. They returned to the tents and the fire ring and the small kingdom of human light. And they did the human things that keep fear from gluing you to the ground. John fed the fire. Kate arranged the towels. Ryan set the driftwood down with ceremony. Amy took out a thermos and poured water into the lid to drink and forgot to drink it. The fire cracked sharp and petulant pack, and a shower of sparks went up with a hiss like soda poured on hot metal. Tom will surface, Amy said, as if reporting the weather. People do. They go under, then they. John shook his head once slow. Sometimes, he said. But the lake is cold. It keeps. They sat 4 around a red heart, listening for anything that would tell them what to do next. From the black beyond the firelight came a soft pad footsteps in wet sand, moving left to right and then right to left the way a watchman might pace. Out on the water, something like a breath drew in and held a long and then let go. Kate lifted the lantern higher. "I want the sun," she said, and it sounded childish and true. "Me too," Ryan said, and it was the last cheerful sentence of the night. They did not sleep, or maybe they slept in fragments, stolen moments, where the brain shut its eyes but left its ears wide open. When morning finally arrived, it felt more like a compromise than a rescue. Thin light bleeding over the trees, the fire nothing but gray teeth gnawed down to ash. Kate sat with her knees drawn up, watching the lake. She had not moved since the small hours when Amy swore she heard footsteps pacing along the shoreline, shush shush, crunch crunch, and nobody had been brave enough to check. Now the water looked innocent, glassy under the first sun, as if night had been a dream, not a contract. "Still no sign," she whispered. "No sign means maybe he made it out somewhere else," Ryan said, though his voice sounded raw, like paper scraped too thin. He hadn't meant to sound hopeful. It came out brittle, a hope-shaped splinter. "Or it means the lake keeps what it takes," John replied, matter of fact. He was coiling rope, a gesture more about keeping his hands moving than any real plan. Amy wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "We call again." She lifted her phone. One bar blinked, disappeared, blinked again. A cruel metronome. No call went through. The wind flittered in the tent flaps, flap, flap, flap like restless hands slapping canvas. Ryan stood. "I'm going in. Shallow dive. Just the near shore. I've got better lungs than Tom ever had." Kate's head snapped toward him. "Don't. You didn't see what we saw last night." "I saw enough," Ryan shot back. "I saw my friend vanish. What am I supposed to do, sit here waiting for the lake to cough him up like driftwood?" Exactly that, John said, standing rope coiled at his side. "If you go in, she'll notice you. She noticed Tom. She'll notice anyone. The lake isn't water anymore, Ryan. It's something else." Amy pressed her hands to her ears as if trying to stop herself from listening. But she still heard it. They all did. A low bubbling under the surface, blub, 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 rolling like a pot just shy of a boil. Kate pointed with trembling fingers. "There. Do you see it? A ripple? Perfectly round. Expanding outward, though no stone had been thrown. In the center, something pale just beneath the glass hair, drifting in slow arcs like weeds. Then gone." Ryan's bravado cracked. He stepped back, hands out. "I didn't imagine that, right?" "No," Amy whispered. "She's showing us. She wants us to look." From the water came a faint, wet giggle, high, like bubbles laughing through a throat. Kate gagged. "That's not funny. That's not." John put a hand on her shoulder. "It's not supposed to be." By midday, they had argued themselves into exhaustion. Go inland. Stay at camp. Signal for help. Run the trail until they hit a ranger station. Each suggestion was a thread. Each thread tangled into the same knot. Tom was gone, and leaving felt like betrayal. In the end, they stayed. The lake rewarded their indecision with silence. Hours passed under a sun that never seemed to warm them. Shadows of gulls crossed overhead, but no gulls cried. The air pressed like damp cloth. Ryan started a fire again. Amy brewed weak coffee in a tin pot. Kate wrote Tom's name in the sand and then scrubbed it out, furious at herself for the sentimentality. John sharpened a stick with his pocket knife, though none of them asked why. "Maybe it's over," Amy said softly, like a prayer she didn't believe. The lake answered with a sudden loud gulp, glop, that made them all jump. "No," John said, staring hard at the water. "It isn't." Night came faster the second time. Or maybe it only felt faster because dread is impatient. The fire cracked, their lanterns hummed. Ryan couldn't sit still. He kept pacing the edge of light, tossing pebbles into the dark. Each pebble made a plunk plunk, then silence, as if the lake swallowed even echoes. "Stop," Kate hissed. "You're feeding her." "Feeding her?" Ryan barked a laugh, though it broke in the middle. "She's not a stray cat. She's what is she, John? You like facts. Give me one." John's face was pale and drawn. Fact, the human brain recognizes patterns in noise. That's why we hear voices in static. That's why she uses sound. It's not random. It's predatory mimicry. Amy shivered like an anglerfish. "Exactly," John said. "Except the lure isn't light. It's the sound you trust most." As if in agreement, the lake produced a faint metallic clink, 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 the exact rhythm of their tin coffee pot being set on stone. But the pot was beside Amy, untouched. She dropped it with a cry. The pot rolled, spilling cold liquid into the sand. Kate grabbed her hand. "Don't listen, don't answer." But Ryan was already moving toward the water spear, stick in hand. "If she wants sound, I'll give her some." He bellowed into the cove, a wordless roar meant to mask his terror. The lake roared back, not with volume, but with depth, a hollow hoo rising from beneath, shaking the stones under their feet. Amy screamed. Kate yanked Ryan backward, but the answer had been enough. The water erupted. Something broke the surface, a head pale and blurred hair streaming like black ribbons. Its mouth gaped. The scream that tore out was jagged, layered, part human wail, part animal shriek, part rushing water. "Shh! Gluger!" Ryan stumbled, fell on his back spear, useless. The figure sank again with impossible grace. John's voice was harsh. "That's the warning. She's letting us know the rest of us are hers. Don't," say the Kate snapped, eyes wide with tears. "Don't." From the shore, faint footsteps again, slap, 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 like someone circling their camp. But when they swung lanterns, nothing stood there. The night stretched long and cruel. And every so often the lake giggled, bubbled whispered sounds they almost recognized. By dawn, none of them doubted anymore. Tom had been only the beginning. Dawn arrived pale and thin, as if the sun itself was reluctant to look at the cove. The fire was a skeleton, the tent sagged, and the air carried that strange dampness that felt like breath more than weather. Amy rubbed her arms and whispered, "Tom's gone. Maybe that's the end." "No," John said, staring at the lake. His tone was iron. "She doesn't stop at one." Kate winced. "Don't say it. I have to," John answered. "So we remember what we're up against." Ryan paced the edge of camp, jittery. He hadn't slept at all, and his words crackled like static. "Then what? We pack up, we run inland. You think she won't follow?" Amy shook her head. "She's bound to the water." "Are you sure?" Kate asked. Amy didn't answer. The lake hissed suddenly, shh, like a long exhale pressed through teeth. They all turned. Ripples formed, slow and deliberate, spreading outward from nothing. In the center, a pale hand broke the surface. Just a hand. Fingers splayed wide, palm upward, as if begging. Then it slid back under with no splash at all. Ryan swore. Nope. I'm not waiting around to be picked off." He grabbed the rope John had coiled and tied it around his waist. "I'm diving. We pull him back if I go under. If Tom's still down there," Ryan Kate tried, but he was already moving. "Don't," John barked. That's exactly how but Ryan wasn't listening. He strode into the water spear and hand rope, trailing like a vein behind him. The pebbles under his boots made a crunch, 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 swallowed by the heavier plop, plop of water as he waded deeper. Amy held the rope with both hands, heart pounding. "We can't let him too late." Ryan inhaled once and dove. The lake answered with a thick gulp. Glop! then a low bubbling churn, blub, 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 as if feasting. Seconds passed, then a minute. The rope jerked violently. Amy screamed. Pull John shouted. He grabbed the rope, Kate with him. Together they hauled sand grinding under their heels. Ryan surfaced half a man, half a ruin. His face was white, his eyes wild. He gasped, choking, spitting water. "She's down there," he rasped. She's smiling." From the water came a faint, mocking giggle, hi, 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 bubbling through the waves. Then Ryan was yanked backwards so hard his teeth clicked. The rope burned through Amy's palms. He vanished beneath a crash of water that looked too tall, too fast to belong to a lake. Kate shrieked. John braced and pulled veins bulging, but the rope came back, slack limp as a dead snake. Ryan did not resurface. The lake burped once on Kate, then went quiet. Too quiet. Amy dropped the rope, sobbing. Kate knelt in the sand, her hands in her hair. "That's two," she whispered. "Two gone." John stared at the flat black sheet that had hidden Ryan whole. His face had no expression. She won't stop until it's 5. They built a fire again because light felt like the only weapon they had. Kate refused to look at the water. Amy prayed under her breath, though she hadn't prayed in years. John sat motionless, knife in hand, as if carving air. From time to time, the lake made small noises, tick, 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 as if a tongue tapped teeth. By late afternoon, the wind rose. The tents flapped violently. Flap, 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 like frantic hands slapping cloth. Kate covered her ears. "I can't do another night." "We won't have to," John said. "She'll come before dark." Amy's eyes widened. "How do you know?" "Because she's patient," John said. "And patience is only cruel if it has an ending." The water responded with a hollow thoom, like a deep drum struck far beneath. And then she came. A shape lifted from the center of the cove, taller than a person, dripping black water hair trailing like kelp. No eyes, no face. Just a suggestion of one. Kate screamed. Amy clutched her lantern. The figure's entrance was accompanied by a sound like hundreds of voices, whispering at once, rising and falling. It moved without moving, gliding closer, though the water around it hardly stirred. Amy shook her head violently. "No, no, no." The figure paused, tilted its head, and then spoke. Not with its own voice, with Ryan's. "Don't fight it," it croaked. "It doesn't hurt, if you just let go." Kate's knees buckled. Amy dropped her lantern. The lantern hit a stone with a sharp clang, and the lake echoed the sound back, clang, 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 like mockery. John stood face grim. "Stay behind me." He gripped the knife, though he knew it was absurd. The figure extended an arm. Water dripped from its fingers, each drop hitting the lake with a hiss, psst, psst, psst. Then it sank. The water closed above it, leaving only ripples. "Where did it go?" Kate whispered. John's eyes scanned the waves. "She's choosing." The lake made a sudden rushing noise. Whoosh! As if something vast had swum just beneath. Amy gasped. "She's under us, she's..." The ground trembled. A wave surged higher than the others and broke across the beach, soaking their fire, dousing it with a violent hiss. The fire died with a furious S, smoke spiraling upward. Darkness fell fast. Too fast. Amy screamed as something cold wrapped around her ankle. She fell clawing at the sand. Kate lunged, grabbed her arm. "Hold on." A strangled shriek echoed from beneath the surface. Metallic and sharp. Amy kicked desperate, but the water dragged her back. She clawed furrows in the sand nails, tearing. "Help me," she screamed. Kate and John pulled, but the force was monstrous. A length of lakeweed rose, wrapping her wrists like ropes. The weed hissed wetly, syrup tightening with each pull. Amy's eyes bulged. She couldn't breathe. The weeds coiled higher across her chest, her throat. "Please," she rasped before the green rope cinched shut. Her scream turned to a choking gurgle. Then the lake claimed her whole. The weeds yanked and she vanished into the black. The water belched, once glug, and sighed long and low. Ooh. Silence again. Only two remained. Kate collapsed into sobs. John stood frozen, face hard stone. "She'll come for us," he said. "Before dawn, she'll finish it." The lake chuckled softly, hi, before falling silent once more. The fire was dead, and the dark felt like it had folded the cove into its pocket. Kate and John stood where Amy had been dragged under sand, still scored by her fingernails. The lake's skin looked flat honest, like a face that refused to admit what it had just done. "We move inland," Kate said. "We climb. We get above this." John nodded, but his eyes stayed on the water, as if it could still be convinced to bargain. "We'll need light." He shook a lantern. Its remaining fuel sloshed. The lantern gave a faint electronic hum, before the wick caught with a whispering f. He raised it, and its halo braided around them like a thin promise. From the shoreline came a small, polite lick of waves and stone. "Don't listen," Kate whispered to herself the way you talk to a child in your own body. "Don't listen to anything." The lake exhaled a slow shh that seemed to come from too many directions at once. They shouldered their packs. John looped rope across his chest like a sash. He'd kept it despite what happened to Ryan. Habits don't surrender easily. They started up the narrow path through scrub oak and dune grass, the sand collapsing under each step. Each footfall made a dry shurr as sand slid back, and the dune grass hissed against their jeans. They hadn't gone far when a new sound teased the air. Bells, not wind chimes. No one had hung wind chimes this far from any porch. But a precise imitation of wind chimes, familiar domestic, a kitchen breathing in summer kind of sound. Delicate notes tinkled, ting, 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 dangling in a breeze that wasn't there. Kate stopped. "My grandmother's porch," she said, voice caught somewhere between laugh and sob. "That's exactly how could it know that it doesn't know," John said. "It throws 1,000 sounds at you and waits for the one that lands like an arrow." Keep moving. They kept moving. Behind them, a pebble skipped on the wet stones. Tick, 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 though neither had thrown it. The path curled along the lip of the cove, then kinked back inland toward a low shoulder of trees. "Signal," Kate said, lifting her phone. A single bar sputtered. She lifted higher, as if height were agreement. The phone chimed a hollow bloop, then fell silent. She killed the screen. If we get service, who do we even tell? "Hi, the lake is eating my friends." "Ranger station," John said, "or the county sheriff. We report 3 missing possible drownings, Blackwater Cove. We mark the site. We stay put until they arrive." "You think we'll still be here when they arrive?" Kate asked. John didn't answer. In the woods to their right, something moved with a wet dragging sound. Schlup. Schlup, like a heavy tarp being pulled through leaves. Kate tightened her grip on the lantern. "John," she said, "did you hear?" "Yes," he said, eyes forward. They reached the ridge where last night the bars had appeared, and then died with a gull's cry. The lake opened below like a lidless eye. Kate tried the phone again. The bars flirted, then walked away. A gull crossed the sky, silently wings, whispering a papery fuff as it banked. "Our best chance is dawn," John said. "More light, more people. Fishermen, maybe. A boat. Dawn took Tom, Kate said. Dawn didn't save anyone. They stood in a long, defeat-colored silence. Somewhere down in the cove, a single hollow note sounded bomb like a drum struck underwater. John flinched despite himself. He pointed along the ridge. There's a split down there, back to the beach from the other side. Lower slope. We take it keep to high ground until we can flag a car on the county road. They started along the ridge path. The dune fell steeply to the left into brambles and dust-gray sand. The lake breathed to their right, patient and wide. A voice came up then, riding the face of the water. Amy's voice, hoarse and tender. "Kate, I'm okay. Come down, please. It's shallow here." Kate froze air, leaving her chest in a single brittle laugh. "Cruel," she whispered. "Cruel, cruel." "It's not her," John said. "I know," Kate said. "I know, but..." She took a step toward the edge without meaning to. The lake rewarded her with a soft, coaxing hush, 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 as someone smoothing a blanket. John caught her elbow. "No." She nodded, shame flashing across her face. "Sorry." "Okay. Okay." They reached the split, a narrow sand vein sloping to a lower shelf of beach. It looked safer than it was. The shelf was only 10 feet above the waterline, but the sand there had been carved into slick plates by prior waves. John tested it with his boot. "Stay on the grass where you can," he said. "If you slip belly to the slope, crawl back up. Don't stand and fight the slide." "Like glissading," Kate said faintly, remembering a college hiking course. "Except we're not on snow and nobody's laughing." They edged down. The slope made a soft seeping sound, sfaff, under their weight grains, slipping, adjusting. At the bottom, the shelf was wider than it had looked from above. Someone had made a fire ring here once long ago. The stones were half buried like teeth. "We rest 2 minutes," John said. "Then we push for the road." The lake gave a small approving plop, as if agreeing to the schedule. Kate sank to a crouch. For a second, the exhaustion took her whole body and squeezed. She let her head hang, and uninvited, her brain played a memory, her brother teaching her to float the way he used to slide his hands under her shoulder blades and say, "Trust the water. It holds you if you let it. Trust the water." The lake sighed, long and low, like it had overheard the memory and wanted to help. Don't trust it. The first wave hit without warning. It didn't build or announce itself the way storybook waves do. It simply reared up, like a sheet being snapped, and came forward with intention. "Back," John shouted. The wave slammed the shelf with a fat startling whoa, and the follow-through hissed, shh, over their boots, ankles, shins. Kate scrambled, but the wet sand skidded under her. John grabbed her forearm. Another wave came. Whump. Shh. The water reached their knees. "Up," John said, voice thin with strain. They tried. A low, giddy giggle bubbled up from the surge, high, 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 like the lake was pleased with its timing. Knees down, John barked, and Kate dropped claws in the sand. She wasn't fast enough. The third wave arrived higher and harder, and with a different sound altogether. Not whump, not SSSH, but a rolling, hungry growl that made the shelf tremble. Wham! Then a sucking slurp as it retreated. It took Kate with it. Her scream cut off in a wet gasp. John lunged, hands catching nothing but the slick of her sleeve as she slid. Then the sleeve was gone, her body in the foam. Then a flash of her hair, then feet, then not even that. The wave didn't crash her. It gathered her as if reclaiming a promise. In the wake, the shelf gurgled, glug, 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 as water sought its old hollows. Kate John's voice cracked into a name he had spoken 1,000 ordinary times, made suddenly holy. Kate, the lake answered, with a bright tinge. Kate, as if shouted into a metal bucket. Then a faraway laughing chime, ting-ting like wind over glass. John ran along the shelf, half falling, half writing, scanning the froth for her head. "Swim sideways," he shouted mindlessly. "Kick, kick." The water surface padded with little slaps, plip, 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 like hands clapping just under the skin. A dark shape bobbed there, a shoulder, an elbow, and then water threw up a single sneaker. Not hers, Amy's. Or was that the point John stopped? He realized with a clarity that scalded that the lake had a sense of humor. He forced himself to stillness. Panic was the one game the cove had already won 3 times. He backed up to dry sand eyes on the waterline where rips display themselves. If you know how to look, a smoothness amid chop, a seam that moves straight out. Instead of along shore, a parade of foam marching to sea. There a darker tongue where the water returned. If Kate had any air, she would be traveling through that tongue. He tied the rope to a buried stone and around his waist, checking the knot twice, then again. "I'm coming," he said to nobody, which was also to Kate. He chose his angle 30 degrees downshore from the rip. He stepped toward the water. The cove made a low, delighted "oh," like guests when the cake arrives. "No more," John said through his teeth. He went in. The first shock of cold took his breath, then gave it back. He timed his steps to the waves, letting each carry him 2 paces before he dug in. He felt the pull of the rip like a hand on his belt. He swam across it, not into it, arms slicing, legs calm. Underwater, the world thickened. His exhale bubbled up, bub, 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 and the lake answered with deeper bubbles rolling past his ears. Blub. 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 He saw nothing but green-brown thickness and bright flecks that might have been mica or bone-white shells or something else. He surfaced, scanned Dove again. He counted seconds. He told himself he had 5 minutes before his strength turned to debt. On the 3rd dive, he saw her. Kate, a pale blur, sliding diagonally below him, hair flared like a starburst. Her arm reached hand opening and closing, as if she were squeezing the lake for air. He kicked down, equalizing the pressure in his ears. The rope tugged. He reached her wrist. A face swam into view between them and stole the breath he had left. Not a face in the human sense, no details to anchor to, but the idea of a woman pressed into water, the way a handprint is pressed into wet glass. The hair streamed forever. The mouth had no edges, and yet it smiled. A sound rose that didn't belong to ears. A saturated hum that lived in the bones and made the heart stutter. John did not let go. He pulled Kate toward him. The figure placed a palm against his chest, as gently as a mother testing a fever. The world tilted. His heartbeat boomed in his skull, thumb, 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 loud as oars hitting a boat. The rope cinched his waist. He felt it, and he felt also the absurd thought that knots were not built for this. He kicked, hauling Kate. The figure followed lazily, a queen, unbothered by effort. All around them, water whispered, shh, like an audience calming itself. A new noise entered the world rope, singing under strain. E, 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 high and metallic. He imagined fibers heating imagined failure. He kicked harder. They broke surface. Air crashed into John like staggered applause. He coughed, ah, ah, ka, ka, and the lake coughed back, ka, ka, in miniature mocking. Kate's head lolled, her eyes fluttered. Breathe, he said, which is not a thing you can tell a body to do, but he said it anyway. He pulled and the rope obeyed. Someone else was taking slack on shore, except there was no one. The knot held. He had a foot on the shelf. The water beneath them sighed, "Oh," and then decided. The figure's hand moved from John's chest to the rope. She pinched it between two absent fingers. There was a tiny ping-ting like a glass tapping, and the rope went limp against John's waist with a hello of slack. "No," he said. "Come in," said a voice behind his ear, low and domestic, a voice he had not heard in 15 years, his father's voice. "We set the table, Johnny." John turned his head and nearly drowned on air. The figure's mouth widened as if laughing without making the shape of laughter. Kate slipped from his arms. He grabbed. The figure was quicker. A wet chuckle rose, her, pleasant as water in a well. John made a choice, then the kind you don't run through a committee. He wrapped his arm around Kate's chest, locked his hand to her opposite shoulder. He went limp, dead weight, in the exact way lifeguards teach and river guides dread. It is hard to steal a body that refuses to help you steal it. The figure cocked her head curious, a tiny bubbling like a question. John pushed his feet to the shelf, found purchase shoved. They slid onto the sand, coughing. Water slapped their backs, slap, like congratulations you don't want. He dragged Kate 2 body lengths up the shelf, then 3. Her eyes opened. She made a sound that was not a word. He pressed her sternum and counted. She choked, rolled to her side, vomited lake. It came out in a stuttering glulurk, and the lake answered with a distant glug, as if offended by the return. "Up," John said hoarse. "Up." He hooked her under the arm and forced her to stand. They climbed. Behind them, the lake began to motor idling with bad ideas. Halfway up the shelf, the sand betrayed them, turning to ball bearings. Kate went to one knee. John yanked her up by force of will, then by the last unbroken rule in his body that said, "Friends do not leave friends on the slope between breaths." They reached the top and collapsed into the grass. For 3 minutes, there were only lungs, in and out, like bellows that had not been oiled. When the world returned, the cova decided to be quiet again. Too quiet. No tick of pebbles, no lip of wave, no insect scritch. The silence sat thick, mum-like felt. Kate turned her face toward him. Her lips were blue at the edges. "Thank you." She said a word that sounded like a compromise between apology and goodbye. "Not done," John said. She nodded. They stood. The ridge path west toward the road looked the same as every other stripe of night. They took it anyway because choosing is what people do when the map refuses to. They walked. Their steps thudded thump-thump on the firmer ground, and far below the cove offered a distant, minding its own business shoosh. The lantern was dying. They came to a place where the path should have bent inland. It didn't. It ran them forward until the brush parted, and there they were, their original campsite. The dead fire. The 2 tents leaning like tired hearts. Kate made a small, broken laugh. "We looped." John stared. He had kept bearings in his head like a carpenter holds a level. The level had become a snake. The lake, very pleased with itself, let out a crisp little pop-pock like a cork leaving a bottle. "No," John said. "No more circles." They tried again this time, hugging the dune line, keeping the water always at their right shoulder. 20 minutes later, they walked into the campsite from the opposite direction. The tents were closer to the water than before, or maybe the water was closer to them. From the dark, a small voice called, "Katie." It was Tom's voice, soft as memory. A second voice followed Amy's, "John, Then Ryan's, "You left me." The three moved around the camp like moths, bumping glass. Tap, tap, tap. Kate covered her ears. "Stop," she said to the night. "Stop." The night, obliging, dropped its voices and replaced them with the domestic clatter of their own lives. A coffee spoon dinging cup ding. A car blinker tick-tick. The soft thud of mail through a slot thup. She dropped her hands. "I hate it," she said. "I hate how it knows how to be home." John took her hand. It surprised both of them, the normality of it. "We stay together," he said. "We sit with our backs to the dune and keep our feet away from the waterline. We watch the sky for morning. We don't answer to any name that isn't ours." Kate nodded. She let the lantern down between their knees. It hummed a weary and the filament clicked tick-tick like a fatigued metronome. Time reconfigured itself into a slow animal. Somewhere to their left, a fox barked once yip, and then thought better of announcing itself. The lake waited. It didn't have to wait long. The sesh arrived like a mood change. The lake's level swelled without theatrics, shouldering forward in a series of slow, heavy pulses that felt less like waves and more like intentions. Each pulse thudded whoom, whoom, whoom into the stones. "Back," John said, and they scooted, higher heels digging. The stones complained kirk, kirk under their weight. The third pulse reached their toes. The fourth reached their ankles. The fifth reached their calves. "Climb," John said. They turned to scramble up the dune, but the dune had turned slick. The sand hissed away under their hands. Kate slipped. John caught her. The sixth pulse arrived higher, stronger. A long, ecstatic sigh rose from the water. Like someone finally knew to say what they meant. It was then that the cove chose. A sudden traveling hump of water lifted in the middle distance and hurried toward them. Not a breaker, a shouldering. John braced. Kate reached for him. "Hold on," he said. The hump hit with a brutal, muffled thud, and the draw after made a deep, greedy suck slurp around their shins. Kate's hand slid from John's. He grabbed fingers on fingers, then fingers on nothing. "John," she cried. Her name skittered across the surface, John, skittering echoes like a tape unraveling. He lunged, and the water shouldered him out of the way with the absent politeness of a crowd admitting a VIP. Kate tipped backward in the foam and vanished into the dark, moving thing. The cove chirped once Pip and was still. "No," John said, and then louder, "No." And then words lost their sense. He ran forward into the bight where the water had been, and wasn't ran until he was thigh-deep and alone. He ran until he understood instinctively that if he took one more step, he would meet the woman who waited for him with her patient palm. He took one more step. She met him with her patient palm. Under the surface, a choir of tiny bells rang, tlin, 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 pleasant as a store door on Christmas. He laughed, which is to say his body made the sound laughter makes when it doesn't know the word for stop. He did not fight. He went under like a man told to sit. The cold seized him. Pressure squeezed his ribs until each breath was a thin coin. His eyes stung and then adjusted. All the world was smoke green. He saw her near and far at once, the way you see the moon, and the reflection of the moon, and the idea of the moon. She took his wrist and guided him deeper. The lake made a domestic noise he had heard his entire childhood, a faucet beginning to run chick, click, chick, shh. He thought of washing his hands for dinner. He thought of not washing them and his mother swatting him with a dish towel. He smiled, and the lake flowed into his mouth. He saw them there, or thought he did Tom, drifting like a leaf at the edge of his vision. Ryan suspended as if listening to a joke he wasn't sure he liked. Amy wrapped in a scarf of long weeds that moved with the pulse of the world. Kate was not there. Or she was, and the lake would not show her to him. He decided to be grateful for that. He looked up. The surface was a silver door. He reached toward it without moving his arm. He said a thing his mouth could not make into air, please. The woman tilted her head. A tiny sympathetic coo, ooh, ooh trembled in the water, and then she lifted him like a parcel to be delivered. He rose. Bubbles climbed around his face, popping in warm pinpricks. The pressure released its teeth. He broke the surface into a world with stars and a shore, and a campsite he did not recognize as his. He took a breath. It was the first true sound he'd made, and it was unfairly beautiful to him, in the way a first cry is to a room of strangers. The breath came out. Ha, ha, ha. And the lake wrapped the sound in soft applause, lap, lap, lap against his shoulders. Then the woman tugged once, a single correction, and he sank back to the depth of his neck, then to his chin, then to his lips. He floated there, faced upward, like a thing the lake had decided to return. Somewhere high above a gull, at last gave voice key, and the sound cracked like china. John's body moved with the little afterwaves. He did not hold his breath. He did not resist. He had the tone of a man who'd received his answer. The lake slid him toward the shelved stones. It let him go the way you let go of a child's hand when the sidewalk is clear. He bumped once, twice, settled in a cradle of rocks. The cove gave a satisfied then went as quiet as a closed mouth. The lantern on shore sputtered. Tick, tick. It died. There were no more voices, no more footfalls, no more bells. Only John buoyed and gently lifted and set down again by a thing that had finished its work for the night. The lake kept John. When dawn came, it found only still water flat as glass, no tents, no fire, no footprints. If anyone walked the shoreline that morning, they might have thought the cove had never known people at all. But the silence was too deliberate. It was the silence of a throat that had swallowed and was still savoring. Deep below, shadows drifted where light failed to reach. Tom Ryan, Amy Kate, and John Five Shapes suspended half memory, half mist. They did not struggle now. The lake had smoothed them into dream. From the black water rose a sound not like a human cry, but close enough to break the air, a long, aching wail, ooh, that carried across the surface like fog. The cry bent with the wind, winding into the trees, rattling their leaves. Campgrounds farther north heard it. Fishermen pulling nets paused, spines prickling. They thought of old stories, drowned maidens, women who sing sailors under. None dared to row toward Blackwater Cove. The wails stretched, layered, splitting into tones, low moan, high shriek, watery sob, hoo, like a choir mourning itself. The lake showed its final cruelty by echoing familiar sounds between each cry. The plink of a pebble, plink, plink, the whisper of tents flapping, flap, flap, the cough of a fire dying, shh, the mock laugh, hi, 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 hi. The cove sang its collection back to the world, a symphony of everything it had taken. On the surface, sometimes a lantern would drift a glass-fogged wick black, sometimes a shoe, sometimes a rope coil gnawed through as if by teeth, but never a body. The woman did not give those back. At night, travelers said they heard footsteps along the shoreline, slap, 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 circling campfires that had no campers. Those who stayed long enough swore they saw her, the pale figure, waist-deep hair, like riverweed face, blurred, hand raised not in warning, but invitation. And always beneath the invitation, the crying. It began as a bubbling sob, glub, 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 rose into a shriek, hey, and collapsed again into a low moan, hoo. Boats avoided the cove. Signs were posted, unsafe water, dangerous currents, but locals knew signs weren't the truth. The truth was that the lake had a bride, and she was jealous of anyone who set foot near her shore. Children dared each other to throw stones from the ridge. Sometimes they swore they heard their names whispered back. Adults warned them not to. Adults themselves, though, did not linger when twilight smeared the horizon red. Because everyone in the county knew at Blackwater Cove, 5 campers entered. None returned. And on still nights when the stars bent low, the water spoke. A single sound would rise, low, cracked, endless. The sound of lungs filled with water, trying still to breathe. The sound of a woman who drowned long ago and would never forgive. The sound of the lake itself crying its stolen names.